Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. At a time when the nation's focus is entirely on the COVID-19 crisis and the struggle for hospital beds, oxygen, and of course, vaccination, one of India's foremost lawyers believes that there is an incipient clash taking place between the government and the Supreme Court because of the government's refusal to accept that the Supreme Court is constitutionally empowered to judicially overview administrative action. Worse still, he fears that if this is not resolved speedily, it could set a precedent that will be very damaging for the future. Joining me now to explain his apprehensions is the former president of the Supreme Court Bar Association and one of India's foremost lawyers, Dushyant Dave. Mr. Dave, last week, whilst taking up matters suo moto, the Supreme Court asked the government for an explanation of its vaccine policy. On Sunday, the 9th, the government responded with a 218-page affidavit where it said, amongst other things, the wisdom of the executive should be trusted. More importantly, the affidavit says any overzealous though well-meaning judicial intervention may lead to unforeseen and unintended consequences. You have serious reservations about the government's affidavit and the attitude the government has taken to the Supreme Court wanting information about vaccine policy. Why are you disturbed by the government's response?
Let me, before I answer to your specific question, let me begin with a little, understanding of why this is so important. Constitution has created Supreme Court of India. There are very few constitutions in the world which expressly create Constitution of India, Supreme Court of India. Article 124 says there shall be a Supreme Court of India. Now, Supreme Court has, amongst others, powers under Article 32 to ensure that fundamental rights of citizens are protected to the hilt. Supreme Court itself has said that rule of law, and which means judicial review of administrative action, is basic structure of the Constitution of India. This was said way back in Keshavanand Bharati's case in 1973, and it has been repeated by the Supreme Court in large number of cases. So what is important today is the Supreme Court entitled to review every discretionary exercise of power by the government or not? The answer to that is yes, because the Supreme Court has said very emphatically, very beautifully, that there is nothing like an unreviewable decision in a democratic setup. Now, this is the premise on which we must, understand why this is important. Now, let me also add to this little something more, that during the Constituent Assembly debate on 9th of December 1948, a very profound statement was made as to why we need Supreme Court. And this is what was said by Mr. Anantha Sayam Iyengar. Mr. Vice President, sir, the Supreme Court, according to me, is the supreme guardian of the citizens' rights in any democracy. I would even go further and say it is the soul of democracy. The executive which comes into being for the time being is apt to abuse its power. And therefore, the Supreme Court must be there, strong and untrammeled by the day-to-day passions, which may bring a set of people into power and throw them out in a very short time. Now, this is important.
Can I
now just no, why Supreme Court has intervened in suo moto proceeding? Because the government has singularly failed in protecting the lives of the citizens, resulting in deaths of lakhs, resulting in...
Let me put to you an opposite viewpoint. Your argument is that the Supreme Court is empowered to judicially review every single administrative action. There is no action taken by a government that is exempt or outside the power of the Supreme Court to review. Secondly, the Supreme Court, you say, has also been empowered by the Constitution to protect the fundamental rights of Indian citizens, and it's on that basis that it reviews administrative action. However, and this is the important point, this government has responded to the inquiry about its vaccine policy with all the details of that policy. There's no doubt about it. It's a 218-page affidavit. What the government has then done is to additionally tell the Supreme Court, we've explained our policy, but don't interfere. And many people say that is the right response from the government, because vaccine policy is very much in the domain of the executive, not the judiciary. The government has explained its policy, but it's told the Supreme Court, don't interfere hereafter. Why is that a mistake?
Well, government has actually, yes, you are right. Government has done something very, interesting. Government has filed a detailed affidavit in response to Supreme Court's order of 30th April 2021, whereby Supreme Court had asked government to clarify on various issues, including supply of oxygen, the vaccination program, the pricing of vaccination, availability of essential drugs, etc., etc., etc. The government does appear to respond to it. But the government has, in paragraph 24 of its affidavit, categorically told Supreme Court that please back off. This is executive discretion, and you should therefore not interfere in this matter. Now, for a government, democratically elected government, to file such an affidavit in suo motu proceedings, even with that one line, while explaining or purporting to explain its position, in my respectful view, is really uncalled for. The government has completely forgotten. Article 144 of the Constitution says that all authorities, civil and judicial, shall act in aid of the Supreme Court. Now, if you have to act in aid of the Supreme Court, you have to come, clearly and saying, yes, you must interfere. We are here to assist you fully, but please see what all we have done, and let us together work out.
We are in the middle of the worst crisis India has faced in its 74 years of independence. No one will deny it. Clearly, policy has to be made by the government. It can't be made by the Supreme Court. They don't have the expertise to do so. They are not epidemiologists. They are not virologists. They don't understand medicine. The government has access to that advice. The Supreme Court does not. Therefore, the government has explained its policy, which it was required to do. Having done that, the government has politely told the Supreme Court, in a pandemic, the worst crisis we've ever faced, let us now carry on making policy. That's our job, not yours. Why is that the wrong thing to do?
I don't think government is at all justified in saying so, especially not this government, having miserably failed in gauging the intensity of the likely disaster, having seriously failed in taking preventive measures, having seriously failed in arranging resources to fight the pandemic, the government, and which has resulted in deaths of lakhs and suffering of millions. The government today is not in a position to tell the Supreme Court or the nation that they have a policy in place. They have failed. Their policies were arbitrary. Their policies were not in consonance with the constitutional scheme. Therefore, the Supreme Court today, as the custodian of fundamental rights, the right to life of citizens, has a right to tell the government that forget your policies today. We are now wanting to re-examine everything, and if need be, we will constitute our own group of experts, as they did for oxygen supply and task force. We will have our own experts who will go in and redetermine the policy.
But Mr. Dave, that is even more worrying, because what you're suggesting is the Supreme Court, because it's unhappy with the way the government has functioned, has the power to become an alternate government itself. And the example you took of the National Task Force that the Supreme Court has set up to advise on oxygen and oxygen distribution is a classic example of how, when the Supreme Court tries to become a government, it lacks the capacity, the talent, and the skill to be one. In that task force that you mentioned, there are epidemiologists and virologists involved. They know nothing about oxygen distribution. There are people who run hospitals as proprietors or as cardiac surgeons. They know nothing about oxygen distribution. Surely, in setting up that task force, the Supreme Court has appealed to the sense of concern of the people. And it may have got the support of the people behind them, but the task force it's appointed is not equipped to handle the problem. This is what I mean. In taking over governance, the Supreme Court puts itself in the wrong.
If the task force is not properly constituted, I think the amicus curiae have the duty to point out to the Supreme Court to reconstitute that. But I'll give you a much better example. About 20 years ago, the India's forest wealth was getting completely destroyed. and the governments of the at the state and central level were not willing to really do anything, allowing all kinds of commercial activity in the forest, resulting in complete degradation of forest across the country. In Godavardhan's case, almost 20-25 years ago, Chief Justice Verma and Justice Kirpal said nothing doing, this must stop. They really took over the control and management of the forest in India, constituted a monitoring committee, appointed Mr. Harish Salve as the amicus, and as a result of that, all projects since then have been scrutinized by the monitoring committee, and we have been able to control the degradation of forest to a great extent. That's a classic example. It was done to protect the lives of future generation. We have now to protect the lives of the existing generation.
I accept the point you're making that there is a good precedent. The forest policy is the example whereby the Supreme Court said to the government, sorry, you don't know what you're doing, you're mishandling it. We will take over, appoint an amicus curiae and get on with it. And it worked in that instance. So then to sum up your position, you believe that the government in paragraph 24 of its 218-page affidavit, where it effectively, to use your language, tells the Supreme Court politely to back off and not interfere in executive domains, the government is attacking the very heart of the Supreme Court's powers. You believe at the very core of the Supreme Court's authority is its right and its power to judicially review administrative actions, and it does so in upholding the fundamental rights of the citizens of India. That is what the government is challenging, and this is why you are so perturbed by the government's response. Have I summed you up correctly?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, frankly, what is troublesome today, that the Attorney General of India is a constitutional authority under Article 76. The Attorney General is singularly absent in these proceedings. The Solicitor General, who's not a constitutional lawyer for the government of India, is assisting the court. I really wish the Attorney General would discharge his duty, because he has a duty under Article 76. He must therefore rightly advise the government, and had he advised the government, I don't think government could have filed such an affidavit saying that don't interfere. Okay. You have to look, just a second. You have to look the very basis of Supreme Court's intervention. When Supreme Court decided to initiate suo motu proceedings, the Supreme Court was greatly perturbed and said that the nation is facing a greatest crisis. And the Supreme Court felt that we must overlook the government's policies, the failures or success of those policies.
Okay.
And I don't think government has any business to tell Supreme Court that please dismiss this writ petition.
Let me point out a paradox. You have very eloquently and powerfully argued, almost on behalf of the Supreme Court, that the government's response to the Supreme Court is a challenge to the fundamental authority of the court, and that this is undermining the Supreme Court's powers. However, and this is the paradox, the Supreme Court itself is silent. We have no idea how the Supreme Court responds to the government's affidavit. It was first meant to meet in a hearing on Monday. Technical glitches meant that hearing didn't happen. Then the hearing was scheduled for today, Thursday the 13th, but unfortunately Justice Chandrachud, who presides over the bench, has got COVID, and the hearing has been postponed, and we have no idea when it will happen. As a result, we don't know what is the Supreme Court's response. And if it is the sort of challenge that you believe the government has made, then the Supreme Court's silence is very worrying. Surely the Supreme Court should have some way of expressing its displeasure with the government's response. At the moment, we have total silence.
Well, let me put it this way, that I am personally deeply disappointed the way Supreme Court has discharged its duties. These are duties, constitutional duties, during the pandemic. They dismissed last year a petition, as I have said on your program, which desired a national disaster management plan for COVID-19. And if that petition was allowed and a mandamus was issued, we would have been perhaps in a better position to fight this pandemic. We would have saved many lives. But having said that, let me tell you, again, and let me quote from Constituent Assembly debate. Why I am so concerned that Supreme Court is, falling short of the expectations of the constitutional framers. It was said on 6th December by Pandit Thakurdas Bhargav. Look at this statement. In a democracy, the courts are the ultimate refuge for the citizens for the vindication of their rights and liberties. I want the judiciary to be exalted to its right position of palladium of justice, and the people to be secure in their rights and liberties under its protecting wings.
But Mr. Dave, it's worse than you're saying, because not only is the Supreme Court silent and we don't know its response to the government's affidavit, but we now don't know when the next hearing will be, because unfortunately Justice Chandrachud has COVID, and therefore there's a real danger that over time the Supreme Court's silence will mean by default it has accepted the government's affidavit, and by default it has accepted the government's argument, don't interfere. Do you see the danger? The Supreme Court's silence, if it carries on for very long, will become the Supreme Court's default position. And therefore, the government will argue the Supreme Court has accepted, it has no right to interfere. So the danger is getting bigger with every day of silence.
Absolutely. I fully agree with you. There can be no doubt about the fact. In fact, Supreme Court has really delayed its interference, frankly, almost by several months, if not almost by a year. Be that as it may, what is the position today prevailing in the country? People are dying for want of oxygen in hospitals.
Let's come back to the Supreme Court. We know the position in the country is dreadful, but the matter here is the Supreme Court.
Therefore, today, for Supreme Court to delay passing any order, even by a single day, is disastrous for the lives and liberties of citizens.
But what happens when Justice Chandrachud, who presides over the bench, has COVID?
Let me respond, and I would request you to bear with me for a little while. The solution perhaps should have been, and this is where I disagree, because this constitution of benches by the Chief Justice itself is a very, very, I would say, flawed exercise. Because senior judges like Justice Nariman, Justice Lalit are kept out. Frankly, Chief Justice of India should intervene today. If he is not interested in taking up the matter himself, he should constitute a bench of 7, 9 or 11 senior most judges straight away. And those judges should immediately take up this matter and examine the issue threadbare. And then, pass orders, judicial orders, which can save every life in the country. Now, if they don't do it, then I must say that the Supreme Court would not have lived up to the expectations that are there under the Constitution. They would not have lived up to the expectations that people have today. People have nowhere else to turn to.
I understand.
So, I think absence of Justice Chandrachud should not delay the proceedings even for a day. These are not the proceedings where, these kind of things should come in the way. We all pray for Justice Chandrachud's speedy recovery. The whole nation prays for it. I personally offer my prayers for his quick and complete recovery. But the proceedings must proceed as quickly as possible, and the only solution is constitution of a largest bench that is possible, so that the government also backs off.
Let me interrupt you.
The government will back off. With an 11-judge bench, the government will think many times before telling the Supreme Court, do not interfere.
Let me put this to you. We have, therefore, if I understand you correctly, reached a point where not only is this a test of the government's treatment and attitude to the Supreme Court, and you've made it clear that you believe that the government is not going to honor and respect the Supreme Court's constitutional power to judicially overview administrative action. But equally importantly, this is also a test of the Supreme Court's ability to defend its own power and authority, because that is what the government has challenged. The silence from the Supreme Court is worrying, which is why you're suggesting appoint a 7, 9 or even 11 judge bench immediately. But if that doesn't happen, then the Supreme Court will clearly be failing to defend its own power and authority. Would you agree? That is what is also at stake.
Absolutely. Let me tell you one thing, that when the emergency was proclaimed in 1975, the Supreme Court in ADM Jabalpur's case let down the country by saying and that the fundamental rights could be suspended during the emergencies period. Now, that was the darkest chapter in the history of the Supreme Court. Of course, Justice H.R. Khanna, the greatest of the judges, differed from the majority judges, including Chandrachud and senior Chandrachud and Bhagwati. But the Khanna repeatedly said that fundamental rights are not fundamental because they are declared fundamental in the Constitution. Fundamental rights are fundamental because they are basic human rights. We are talking about basic human rights of citizens, a billion plus citizens. Supreme Court therefore must assert itself. If it does not assert itself today, then I must say Supreme Court has already in recent years ceded territory to the executive, defending almost every illegal action of the executive by series of judgments. I need not go into those judgments. But Supreme Court has certainly ceded the territory. It is time Supreme Court reasserts itself and tells the executive that you are under the Constitution. As Chief Justice Coke said several hundred years ago to King James, that you are under God and the law. The Supreme Court must tell the government that you are also under the God.
Can I interrupt you? You are demanding of the Supreme Court that its judges should behave with the integrity and with the authority that they have not shown for many years. You are demanding qualities of them that they haven't shown. And let's be honest, there are many instances where the Supreme Court, let me finish. There are many instances where the Supreme Court, rather than stand up to the government, has buckled under. I won't go into details. I don't want to embarrass present judges or previous judges, but you know that. So you're expecting judges to become something other than they are. They don't have it. They haven't shown it. Where are they going to do it from?
Well, I am not demanding. Who am I to demand? But I am certainly pleading with folded hands that the Supreme Court really comes into being and reasserts itself, reinvents itself to really ensure or to really show to the country that it is that institution which the constitutional framers had desired it to be.
Let me put this to you then. If the Supreme Court fails to stand up for its own powers, and the precedents established over the last 2-3 years suggests it will, sadly, if it fails to stand up for its own powers, then will we continue to be the country the Constitution envisaged? Or will the Supreme Court's failure to assert itself make us a very different sort of democracy?
See, the fundamental principle of a democracy is rule of law. And rule of law is the basic structure of the Constitution. And the ultimate protector of that rule of law is the Supreme Court of India. And there's a very beautiful, why I am saying a larger...
We're running out of time. I don't have time for you to quote something, but I'm adding to what you're saying. The Supreme Court let me finish this because it's important. You're saying the Supreme Court is
during the
rule of law.
During the
Supreme Court doesn't seem to want to protect the rule of law. That's the problem. They don't want to assert themselves. They haven't for the last 4 days. There's no sign of an alternate bench being set up to take over from the one Justice Chandrachud can't preside over because he's ill. You're wanting them to do something, but they aren't showing any signs of wanting to do it. That's the problem.
Yes, I agree with that, and that's why I'm telling you that Constituent Assembly, they said that these judges of the Supreme Court are like rishis of the age-old India, and as rishis, they must really do the whatever is required for the welfare of the citizens. So I am pleading, I am begging, beseeching the Supreme Court that please get out of your slumber. Forget the executive today, because the executive is unable to protect the citizens. Forget whether they have failed or not. They are unable to protect the lives of the citizens. We don't know how many more million people will die coming months. So I say that Supreme Court should really be the supreme tribunal for citizens' rights.
You've expressed yourself clearly, forcefully, passionately. I might even add, at times controversially. The problem is, I hope the judges of the court are listening to you. I hope they heed your advice, because if they don't, the danger is This incipient clash could set the precedent for the future. It could be repeated on multiple occasions where the government says to the court, you have no right to interfere, and the court's power to judicially overview administrative action will then shrink because it won't have been used. That is the danger. And you ended by saying that you beg, you beseech the Supreme Court to get out of its slumber. That's the problem. When a man doesn't want to be woken up, he carries on sleeping. And maybe that's what the Supreme Court wishes to do. Sweet dreams may be better than facing up to the nightmare of reality. I thank you for this interview, Mr. Dave. I thank you for making us aware at a time when everyone's attention understandably is focused on the dreadful COVID crisis, that there is a second crisis in the making which needs to be nipped in the bud. But if it's not, it could become much worse because it could change.
I will add one sentence.
Very quickly.
I will add one sentence. What I am suggesting is a solution to the COVID problem. And that solution lies with the Supreme Court.
Well, that is controversial. Whether the Supreme Court can actually solve the problem by trying to pretend to be a government is another matter. I won't go into that. We quarreled about it earlier, but certainly the Supreme Court needs to exercise the power of judicial review, because if it doesn't, that power can lapse, and that's the danger. Powers can lapse if you don't use them. They fall into desuetude, and there is a danger this could happen here. Thank you very much, Mr. Dave. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you very much.